Let's Take This Outside with Marianne Iveson, the podcast where she speaks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about why they connect with nature.
Today, we're diving into the book Flow, a powerful anthology redefining women's roles in adventure sports. Edited by Denisa, Krásná, a Czech highliner and scholar, and Alena Rainsberry, a queer American kayaker, Flow brings together the voices of women from around the globe, climbers, kayakers, mountaineers, and more, who are breaking barriers and reshaping the outdoors. It's about empowerment, unity, and transcultural feminism through the lens of whitewater, rock, and highlines. Please welcome Denisa and Alena. Denisa and Alena, welcome to Let's Take This Outside. I'm so excited to talk to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's great to be able to chat with you.
First of all, we're all over the world right now. I'm in Ottawa. Denisa is in the Czech Republic. Alena, you said you're in Idaho. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm actually in a small town in the Sawtooth Mountains called Stanley, Idaho, on a little bit of a kayaking tour here with one of my best friends and her dog.
I love when people record from different places. Like sometimes it's like in a closet, but surrounded by like camping gear. So I always love to see where people are recording from. So I love that you're physically still in like a sleeping bag, right?
Yeah, that's right. We're at a little bakery. We woke up this morning and went into service. So still, we wanted to sit outside so we could be with the dog. And so I have, still using our sleeping bags for warmth to be out on the patio.
That's I'm actually really jealous of how you're recording this right now.
It's really beautiful here. And yeah, the mountains are stunning. I've never seen the Sawtooths before. So it's a really good time here.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more later, more about Czech Republic, Denisa, but you're in the Czech Republic right now. How's nature setting there? Is it beautiful?
It's gorgeous. It's spring and it's raining right now. It's my favorite weather. I actually love Pacific Northwest, but it doesn't rain as much here as it does in Seattle or Vancouver. So today we have a truly Pacific Northwest weather, but it's very green and I like these days a lot. So yeah, very beautiful. I'm looking at it right now from a fourth floor apartment.
First question, how did you're both badass in your own right, but how did you two meet?
We actually met at Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington. We were both in the hiking club. Neither of us had cars. And so we were in this little club that allowed people to meet up with people with cars so we could go hiking on the weekends. And we were actually on a mountain hike in Vancouver on Seymour Mountain. And we started chatting. I learned she was a foreign exchange student at the university from the Czech Republic. And I'd actually just decided that I was going to move to Prague in the Czech Republic after I graduated, even though I'd never been there before. I didn't know anybody there. And so I'd never even met a Czech person before. And so I asked her what she thought of Prague. And she said that it was beautiful and that she thinks I'd like it. And so when I did move there, we reconnected and started hiking in the mountains on the weekends. And I'd go visit her and her family on the other side of the country from Prague, which is only like a 2-hour train ride away because the Czech Republic is a pretty small country, but it's so beautiful in the mountains that it has to offer. Really, really fun to experience there.
And Denisa, do you want to give me your take on that, on you two meeting?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that I met Alena, but I remember when we met at Seymour Mountain, I then approached Alena one more time during that semester to just ask her about snowshoes, right? So, but I think we didn't have any other adventure stories from there. But then I'm so glad we reconnected in the Czech Republic because we also started climbing. So that was actually our first sport, hiking and climbing. That was what connected us at first. So we did manage to go around the country and climb at some crags and meet Adam Ondra. I took a great photo of Alena with Adam, but then realized I didn't actually take it, or it was so blurred you couldn't even tell there was Adam. So that was our story from the Czech Republic. And since then, we've been really good friends and adventure buddies.
I love that. From across the globe meeting, now you're still adventuring together now. Denisa, like you said, you're from the Czech Republic. Where did your love of nature begin and how did it get you into highlining?
Well, love of nature, definitely, that was instilled in me already at a very young age as a child from my parents. My parents are very adventurous. I mean, not adventurous, but very outdoorsy. They love hiking. They love going on backpacking trips. So even now I still go on long backcountry trips with my dad and my mom. So we've been traveling ever since I remember. But then highlining, that was only during COVID, so 4 years ago. And I started highlining, I was just like lining first, and I never thought I could actually start highlining, but I always wanted to because I loved climbing, and I thought it was really cool to have the slack lines really high in the mountains. And yeah, it wasn't as difficult as I thought, it is hard, but it wasn't as difficult to get from the slack line to the high line. I always imagined people must have been doing it for, ever since they were children. So for me, it was surprising that you can start at an older age, even, when you retire.
Well, I feel like the thing about starting as a kid is like you kind of get over the fear at a young age. When you're an adult, you're already afraid of things, right? So you kind of have to get over it. But can you describe what highlining is, if people don't know what it is?
Sure. Slackline is usually 2 centimeter or 1 inch thick webbing that we walk on. And it came from climbers in Yosemite Valley in the 80s. So they started putting it on top of, from Lost Arrow Spire in 1985. That was the first 16-meter long highline. We walk between towers, over rivers or wherever we can. We have a gap enough, wide enough and big enough, high enough. And so highlining is just slacklining in the heights. And yeah, it's a really fun sport to practice, but doesn't have to be always high. Slacklining is also really good for you.
I've always seen people do it. I'm not great at it, but I feel like balance, core strength, all those things are very,
exactly.
very important.
And also I would add for highlining, especially mental preparedness. So of course it really helps not to be afraid of heights. But even if you are not afraid of heights, it is very hard to take the first steps on a high line because our brain is just not used to that amount of exposure that you experience when you are standing on a very thin webbing, 2 centimeter or 1 inch, wide webbing. It's nothing. You just feel like you are walking in the air on clouds. And so I think like taking those first steps or even like standing up is just mind blowing for everybody.
Alena, you're from the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yes, I'm actually from Washington State. I live in South Washington now, so really close to Oregon. The region is called the Gorge, and it attracts a ton of whitewater kayakers. A bunch of people move there to do outdoor sports like mountain biking, skiing, as well as kayaking, and a lot of wind sports there as well.
It's a perfect place. I almost can assume why your love of nature and where your love of nature began. But how did you get into kayaking?
Yeah, so I actually found kayaking in the COVID pandemic. It was kind of my coping mechanism in the first dark COVID winter when there was like not a lot you could do or anything. And I just randomly found a group of people who was willing to take me to the river and teach me. And I learned to roll in the river in the winter, and the rivers in Washington are actually really cold. So when you're first starting out, you're actually in the river quite a bit. You're swimming and you're flipping over all the time. But it was really fun, and it was a really great distraction and good for my mental health to be able to learn something new, try something different, and experience my state in a way that I hadn't before. Because like Denisa was saying, it's always raining in Washington, and that was just a part of it. I grew up in Western Washington, and so being in the rain was always just part of the weather I was used to.
Just always wet, just forever wet. always wet.
Always wet, yeah. Exactly. But learning to whitewater kayak really changed my perspective on the rain, which was just part of it, kind of a downside, because when it started raining, all your friends would start texting you because the rivers start to rise and everybody's really stoked to go out and paddle. So it was a really fun mind shift from, it's like a rainy day today to like, yes, like today we are going to the river and like we're going to go kayaking and it's going to be a really fun day.
I can't think of any other sport when people are excited for it to rain.
Yeah, I know. It's a really cool thing about the sport, and to be able to reframe how I thought about the place I grew up and the place where I still live.
Flow, your book, brings together these really beautiful stories from women across, whitewater kayaking, climbing, highlining. What was the initial spark that led you both to create this?
Well, for me, it was actually academia. So I'm an academic, a researcher, and I got this grant to study decolonial outdoor counter-narratives. So I started looking at these like counter stories to the traditional mountaineering narratives of like conquest and nationalism and go and climb the highest mountain in the world and, all of this and the narrow ideas of how success is defined. And so that was the initial idea, to like analyze this and look for some non-traditional stories. Julie Reck, she's a Canadian academic studying mountaineering and also life writing narratives. She wrote a really good book, False Summit, where she analyzed these Himalayan stories, traditional narratives, memoirs. And so I connected with Julie, and we just discussed this. And I told her, hey, Alena and I, like my friend and I, we were talking, and like, it would be cool to write a book where there would be these counter stories, because in my research, I haven't found that many, and especially not in our sports of highlining and kayaking. In highlining, there are barely any books written yet. It's a very young sport. As I said, it started in the 80s, so relatively young. So Alena and I, while we were adventuring in Squamish in BC, we started talking about this, but only just, roughly like, oh, it'd be cool to, have a book where there would be stories like this. But the idea really took shape after we climbed Half Dome in Yosemite, where we traveled to Catsit for my friend, a highliner. And then we were just shattered, like both mentally and physically the next day. And we just thought, hey, let's do it. Like let's write that book. And we came up with the title then. It only changed very slightly. We came up with the whole structure, the idea for how many stories we would have, what kinds of stories. And we started writing or approaching potential authors right there back then. So
I do want to ask, this is more of a selfish question as a Canadian. I know that you obviously enjoy Canada, but like, can I get your perspective on Canada and people who explore in Canada? Like you just mentioned, Julie. Can I get your perspective on like what you think of nature here? Because it's, it's broad and it's spectacular.
Yeah, it is spectacular. I mean, I am also a Canadianist. It's my profession. Like I study Canada. I am.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm actually in charge of this Canadian center, the biggest one in the Czech Republic. And I just designed the whole website, used a lot of pictures from the mountains from Canada and like my pictures of bears and stuff. So I obviously love Canada, not just the nature, but especially the nature. But I love the people, the culture, history. I study Canadian literature, and I got my PhD in Canadian studies. So yeah, so I mean, that's I am a big fan of Canada. I of course also critique some things about Canada as my job, but not as much as I critique your neighbor. So yeah.
I can see Alena's face right now. Alena, what's your thoughts on our neighbors to the north?
I mean, I've always loved Canada, like the nature in British Columbia, which was just a couple hours north from where I live and grew up. It's like the Washington Pacific Northwest on steroids. The mountains are a little bigger. The islands out there for sea kayaking are a little bit more hardcore. Everything is kind of just a little bit more extreme and extremely beautiful. And Denisa and I actually spent a couple weeks out in Squamish filming, kayaking, highlining, and climbing there this summer. And yeah, it's just stunning. I've always liked going up there, and I've taken trips to Canada. As a kid, we went there camping a lot, and my mom drove us in a Honda Odyssey, just her and the three kids, Vancouver Island, all the way up to ferry to Bella Coola and everything. So I have very fond memories of British Columbia, and it's fun to be able to go back now and to be able to go whitewater kayaking there and experience the rivers, as well as climbing and getting a little bit of time out on the Chief. Denisa even made me go out on a high line on the Chief, which was really extreme. I can slackline, but I don't highline, so I can't stand up, but you can still safely go out there and kind of experience the feelings of being out in the void on the webbing, and it's a really extreme feeling. I don't really consider myself having a fear of heights. When I'm rock climbing, I feel fear, but it's not that rational kind that people talk about with heights when they're afraid and they're just standing on a cliff. But when you are out on a high line and just surrounded by that much air, I mean, our brains are not hardwired to be able to experience that much open space, and it really does feel pretty extreme. So really fun to be able to be out in British Columbia and take trips up there for camping and highlining and kayaking. Yeah.
Yeah, and like Canada's not just these big, beautiful mountains too. There's just like we have pretty much every nature you can possibly imagine. So Denisa, you were actually just talking about like reaching out to women to contribute to Flow. Was there any like specific kind of diversity or voice that you guys were prioritizing when looking at contributors?
Yeah, we really wanted to prioritize the voices that haven't been heard yet. So as I mentioned before, we weren't looking for the traditional stories of success. So it wasn't our priority weren't women who have already published something or who are record holders. We eventually included these as well, the ones that we think have a powerful story and also, can contribute something. And we wanted to create this community of women who both are already who have already made it, to say, to put it that way. And then also, and most importantly, the women who are just starting, who are really passionate about their sports. And those women, I think, and that included me and Alena at that point. And I can now tell after 4 years of highlining that the passion was the biggest when I was writing my chapter. That means 2 years ago. And I think my chapter is much better because of it, because I had all of those raw emotions. And I also think that the things that I wrote about, I wouldn't be able to write about right now. And that means that for people who are just beginning, my chapter that I wrote, I think, will be more inspiring than anything I could write right now. And that was kind of our point. We wanted to inspire just about anyone who wants to enter the outdoorsy world, not just these 3 sports, to start. And therefore, we wanted a diversity of voices. And that includes people of color. We wanted people of any age. We have a story of a 65-year-old highliner, for example, just all of this. We also wanted some transgender authors, but unfortunately we didn't have a publisher at that point. So we couldn't guarantee that, their work would not be for nothing. And so that was, of course, harder when we were approaching potential authors. We couldn't promise anything, made any promises. So we understand that only a few of them declined because they didn't have the time and capacity to devote to a project, or the energy to devote to a project that might not, have any outcome.
Let's Take This Outside with Marianne Iveson. Let's Take This Outside now has a newsletter. Keep up to date with outdoor news, events, and great discount codes and deals from our partners. Sign up today at letstakethisoutside.ca.
Many stories in Flow show how adventure sports can feel inaccessible. So whether that's, gender, race, body type, geography, what are some of the most powerful examples of these barriers being overcome?
I think I would say our Indian authors, as in authors from India. I think Alena, who is a kayaker from India, but also Kavita, who is our climber, the author from India and a rock climber. Those 2 women, I think, have overcome so many barriers, including barriers in the society, that a very traditional society that doesn't have that many women yet in outdoor sports, let alone in extreme sports. Or even though there are already women or girls that are doing these sports at the age of 20, they are usually told to either choose a career and go study for a university or go and marry and have kids. But the option to pursue their sport beyond the age of 20, that's usually unheard of. But these women, they have decided to, keep going. Kavita, for example, she decided not to get married or have kids. She's already 34, and now she's taking this mountaineering course and wants to open a guest house in the Himalayas. So these stories, I think, are the most powerful ones. But I just picked those 2 because they came to my mind. But I think stories like this from Latin American women too, but also the ones within the US. So immigrants, 1st or 2nd generation immigrant stories, I think those are also the ones that show us how many barriers you have to overcome in a country like the United States that doesn't offer healthcare or anything to everybody, as you and I know that that's a great privilege to have. But I think people in the United States, they really do have many barriers to overcome.
Were there any stories that surprised you or maybe shifted your own thoughts on what like adventure really means?
That's a great question. Let me think. I mean, I think with some of them, and this is something that we really wanted to get at when we were asking these women to write stories, is it's not just about like the like expedition or like the like objective, like so many adventure stories.
Like the conquering?
Exactly, the conquering mindset where there's like, you know, we're gonna go like maybe paddle like the hardest river that's never been paddled, and like that's the story. Or like, you know, there's a continuing narrative like in the climbing world about like who, you know, like speed climbing, like who can like, you know, do the same climb but like even faster, or like the, you know, climb the tallest peak but even faster, or like do an entire ridge line and even faster, you know, faster, higher, stronger, harder, like that whole narrative. But a lot of the stories included in Flow really kind of get at the heart of like the journey inside. And like, even if you are, you know, newer to climbing or newer to kayaking, it's like overcoming like the own fears. And like everybody, you know, the don't have fear mindset really is like becoming quite outdated. And it's more of like, how can you use like fear, you know, not try to like push it away or like pretend like it doesn't exist when you're doing some of these sports that like inherently can be like really scary, because like the risk is real. Like there's real risk in like kayaking and climbing. I mean, highlining, you know, there's a lot of climbing involved in highlining to be able to set up those rigs. And it's a lot of the women that write their stories for Flow kind of describe that process of like how you deal with this feeling that is there for a reason, but you don't want it to inhibit your progress or, you know, the adventure you're having or the sport that you're doing. And so it's kind of that coming to terms with what to do with this feeling. And a lot of the authors write about how they kind of learn to navigate that and not just push it away or pretend like it doesn't exist, but like make friends with it or find a space for it to exist alongside the other emotions they're experiencing, like joy and, you know, community building and everything else that goes along with these sports. Because it's not just about like your own achievement. You know, I know all three of these sports, like the community that you do it with is so important. It, like, you know, you're always like climbing with a, you know, a buddy, you have somebody who's belaying you, you know, and kayaking, like those are the people that are gonna, you know, help pull you out of the river when you mess up. And then with highlining, you obviously have to have multiple people to set up those rigs, and you really like are trusting these people with your lives. Like these sports are outside, you know, the conditions are variable and the environments are dynamic, and so it really helps people who do these sports like bond quickly, create really strong friendships and memories when you're doing these activities that are inherently higher risk, but the reward is so great when you like have a really great day out like kayaking or highlining or climbing. And that's another one of the things we really wanted to highlight when Denisa already mentioned like expanding the definition of success to be more than just records, like who walked, you know, the longest line or who's done like the highest waterfall or like climbed, you know, whatever mountain the fastest. But, you know, like most people who are practicing these sports aren't actually doing it to be the best or to be like the fastest, but to like have a good day out in nature, like doing their thing, like with their friends, and like to be able to like come home safely. And like that really is a definition of success that we wanted there to be like more representation of.
I think that's also like a human feeling, like no matter where you live, whether you're in the Czech Republic, Canada, wherever you are, India, I think that's a universal feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so like they're, you know, for everybody that's like pushing the sports and like getting on the podiums, like that is, it's so incredible to watch. Like I follow all of those people too and like keep up with that news. But for a lot of people, like, you know, they do these sports like for so many other reasons, and like being able to represent some of those stories was like a huge part of like the mission for this project.
The full name of the book, Flow: Women's Counter Narratives from Rivers, Rock, and Sky. It's such a great name. Like it's kind of like the double entendre. The book explores like flow as a state of being and as a metaphor for movement through nature, life, and identity. But of course you have like the rivers that flow. How do you define flow in your own outdoor experiences?
Well, for me, flow really became a concept when I started highlining. Like, I think you can experience flow in any sport or while meditating. But for me personally, it takes a long time to reach the flow state when I go running, for example. When I go running, and I love running, I usually have really great ideas for, what to ride, and I process many things, and I love that. But I don't get the same feeling as when I'm highlining something long. Usually for me, it has to be a long highline, and I get into this state of, I wouldn't say that I don't think at all, but I kind of look at my thoughts from somewhere else, and they just kind of flow there as well. But this state was something that I became really obsessed with, because I think like this state of just being perfectly present is something we don't experience that much in everyday life these days. And I think for me, the closest activity where I can experience this is writing. I just get completely lost, and I don't know what time it is, how much time has passed. So like writing for me and highlining are those two activities where I can reach flow more easily. But I think also it's really interesting that, for example, our author, Dorothea Hamilton, she has 4 kids, and she talks about flow in her chapter and how she sees it as a gendered state as well, and how flow, can be politicized, because she, as a mother of 4, doesn't get to experience flow that much because she just doesn't have the time for it, right? She goes highlining, but she has only limited time, so she doesn't, get into that state. It's not as easy, especially after you highline. It was quite easy for me to get into flow state when I was starting to walk longer highlines, and now it takes more time to get there. Still less time than other activities, other sports, but more and more time as you progress. And so for Dorothea, who has been highlining for a while now, she needs sufficient time. And with 4 kids, she nicely explains that, flow is gendered, flow is a privilege, though not afforded to everyone. And the same goes with time. Time also, is a privilege that she doesn't have. And so, there are definitely changes that need to be done in these communities so that there are fewer barriers for people like her, for example, and other mothers. But I think that's changing too. So anyway, that's flow for me, just this present state where I can relax.
Alena?
Yeah, I can also find it like when you're like really focused and like super hard rapids where you're like putting all of your like energy into like paddling well. But honestly, there's a lot of time when you're on the water, when you're kind of like in between rapids, or it's really like easy features and like super flowy, and you're like in a canyon and it's really beautiful. I mean, even my home river, you're like, it's in a canyon and it's green and it's beautiful, and there's like springs coming out of the walls coming down that you can drink from. I mean, it's really like magical, and just like being able to relax in those moments, like in between, I find it's the easiest to kind of like sink into that really flowy state. And then like Denisa was saying, like it is really hard to like find in your life when you're not like, it's so fun to like find it in these sports. But the closest I can come to without kayaking is like, I actually work in a wood shop now doing woodworking, and it's really easy for it to like get so engrossed in the task, and then time just becomes like meaningless, and you're just so focused on what you're doing, and everything else you are just not thinking about. And it's like a really like lovely thing to be able to find like off the water as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a really beautiful thing when you find it, and then it's even more rewarding when you're with friends and like you're like chosen community and everything, and you're just there experiencing like the same thing and having a really like magical experience together.
For me, I would say some of the sports that I find it in, like cycling, I would say it's like very easy to find it in, right? Because it depends where you're cycling. But if you're downhill and you're just like in that moment and like you're like speeding down the road and you just like it's like almost like breathing into it, I find. And I talk about it so much, I'm probably annoying about this, but I talk about I took up swimming last year, and I started doing outdoor swimming in lakes, open water swimming, and like they're like, you have to just be so in flow when you're open water swimming. Otherwise, all I think about is like what's underneath the darkness. So it's probably like similar to highlighting, not as dangerous, but like similar to highlighting, right? Where you're like,
I would say it's more dangerous, actually. Yeah, I would definitely drown. I would be so scared if I was doing what you're doing. No, seriously. And kayaking as well. Like this is definitely the hardest and like the most extreme sport that we have in the book represents it, and objectively dangerous. So like, yes, swimming in deep lakes, you have all my respect for doing that. I'm not a good swimmer.
It took a while. If someone is new to outdoor sports but doesn't, fit the mold, right? There's this idea, if you put in a ChatGPT, show me an outdoorsy person, it's going to be a 6-foot buff white guy with like a backpack and like, some hokas on and like, right? So if someone doesn't like fit the mold, what message do you hope they take from Flow? One thing I hope they take is like to go like look for the community. Like there is this growing movement. It has already started, like we, Flow, we're hoping it's contributing to this movement that has already started. There are groups like even in Portland, there's a diversified whitewater group where people can find, like lessons on like how to roll and everything for people that like don't fit the mold. There are like communities popping up. One of our authors who's based in Minnesota, but is Indigenous Mexican descent, she focuses a lot of her energy on like mentorship for the BIPOC community. There is a growing movement of groups that are more open for folks who don't necessarily like fit the established mold. And with this growing like movement, we're hoping like that mold will change and that there isn't a mold and that everybody like will feel like welcome and they won't feel discouraged like based on what ethnicity they are, like where they come from or how they look or anything like that. What's next for Flow? Do you have like maybe documentary or is there some, or can you not talk about it? I see your faces and you're probably like, we can't talk about it.
Oh, we can.
No, we can definitely talk about it. Yeah, basically right after we turned in our manuscript to Rocky Mountain Books, which is our publisher, we started working on a film aspect for the project as well.
This is a perfect opportunity to make it, like it's so perfect. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah. But basically, I mean, in the book itself, there are tons of photos. I think there's like 80 plus photos of all the contributing authors that they submitted these photos. The book actually is in horizontal form instead of vertical, so that, the photos can be even bigger. So it's super beautiful photos in there. Like these sports are so aesthetic. They're so beautiful. And where people are doing these sports are so beautiful too. And so the visual component is so important, and just showcasing like how these athletes are interacting with the environment. And so we wanted to take that visual component one step further. And so after we finished the book, we decided to start a film project. It grew from it was just going to be a photo shoot originally of all 3 sports happening at once. We actually scouted a spot in Squamish. That's why we were there last summer, where we could do a photo shoot with a kayaker in the river, a climber on a canyon wall, and a highliner above it. And we were like, well, that'd be so interesting logistically. Like we should make a 5-minute film on like how we even set it up, because the setup, the shooting of the photo will be just as interesting as, the photo itself. And then that grew into a feature-length documentary. We're actually showcasing one athlete from each of the sports. And so our featured kayaker, she's a teenager in Ecuador. And so she's an up-and-coming rising star. She's going to be representing Ecuador at the Junior Slalom Championships in France this summer. Our featured climber is Kavita, as Denisa mentioned, in India. So Denisa and the crew were filming in the Himalayas and all throughout India in November. And then our featured highliner is Denisa herself. And so I believe they were filming even right before we started recording this podcast.
We are.
And then the fourth part of the film is the original idea we had, where we do have this shoot going on in Canada where all of the sports are happening at once. We have this incredible shot taken by my friend Kate Burke, who I'm with kayaking in Idaho right now. So we have this really beautiful shoot photo that we do believe is the first one with all the sports happening at once. And then more than that, in that part of the film, it'll be more about like the community of everybody. We have contributing authors that actually came from all over the world to come, hang out with us in Canada and like have a picnic, and people got to try different sports. We put a lot of people out on a highline that had never been out on a highline before, and they got to experience what that's like. So it was a really, really cool project over the summer, kind of filming that fourth section. But yeah, that's basically the premise for the documentary, being able to showcase one athlete from each sport, and then the last section, which will be kind of like a coming together and like more community focused. After we're done recording, I have some things to send you, because I've interviewed some really amazing. Have you heard of Wildflowers? Oh, yeah.
Megan Ward?
Yeah, Megan Ward. I was in Banff this year for the film festival. I got to hang out with the publisher, Don Gorman and Grace Gorman, who's actually one of the producers for our film as well. We're super lucky to have her. And she introduced me to Megan. I got to watch the premiere of Wildflowers. It's such a beautiful documentary. So yeah, we took some inspiration from that film as well. So
yeah, I interviewed Megan. I've met Megan. Very small world,
lovely.
of course.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you guys don't know Megan, you have to meet Megan. She's like unbelievable. So oh, that's so cool. Okay, you already know her, so I don't introduce you.
Yeah.
And what's your first of all? Also, can I see it when it's done? Can someone send it to me, please?
The film?
Should promote it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah,
And we're hoping to have it premiered at Banff, but we'll see. We just got a green light for the late submission, so we are doing our best to have the filming and post-production done before the deadline. That's the end of August, so hopefully that will work out.
Soon.
And we'll see, if we get selected, if we even manage the post-production by that time. But yeah, we're really working hard now to make it happen.
I love what you both have built. I'm so excited to kind of share it with the world. Where can people find Flow? Where can they buy it?
So direct from the publisher is one of the best places. And then it's available on Amazon and Amazon in other countries. And then at a bunch of local bookstores as of a couple days ago. I don't have that list. I actually just asked the publisher for a list of all the local bookstores. It was available yesterday. So hopefully we'll be able to put that on our website soon. Our website is riversrocksky.com, and it has a whole page just about the book and where you'll be able to buy it. So soon we'll be able to have all those local options listed. The official publication date was 2 days ago on May 20th, and we know there's been some shipping delays to the US. It might be like a couple days delayed, but then we'll be able to have that like updated on our website soon, so people will be able to find local bookstores to be able to support their local bookstores. They can buy direct from the publisher, and if that isn't an option, then of course Amazon is there as well.
Alena, Denisa, thank you so much for taking time and on Let's Take This Outside. And honestly, this is such a cool book. Cannot wait to see the film put together, and appreciate you both so much and what you're doing for the outdoor community, especially for women.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your podcast as well. I love listening to it while I run.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, ladies.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. For more Let's Take This Outside, go to letstakethisoutside.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.